Hello and welcome to this month's Grief Matters Ended Beginnings workshop. We will be joined today by a panel of individuals with professional and/or lived experience around relationships after loss and grieving your baby. First, we will hear from April Boyd, a psychotherapist and coach who specializes in love, loss, and relationships. She is also the mother to a little girl named Nora, whom she only met briefly, but who has forever changed her life. We will then hear from two couples, Amy and Chris, and Danielle and Joey, who lost their babies in 2016 and 2017. They will be sharing their experiences with us. We invite you to ask questions and share your experiences in the live chat space during this premiere. You can also leave comments in the comment section, which remain after the premiere.
Hello and welcome. I'm April Boyd, and it's nice to meet you. And in other circumstances, I might say it's nice to be here, but when we're talking about things of how we navigate life after loss, how we navigate relationships after loss, how we move through these experiences of massive upheaval and heartbreak in our life, it's not exactly nice to be here. The truth is, all of us wish that we didn't have to be here at all. But I will say it is important to be here. And I have so much respect for your decision in coming into this space because I really believe that, especially in a culture that puts so much pressure on us to just shut things down, to just act like we're fine, to just not talk about things and not think about things and somehow move on. I believe it is a radical and powerful and really, in some ways, unavoidably necessary decision to allow yourself to just hold space in your own life for the magnitude of the heartbreak, for the magnitude of the experience, and what it is that you've been forced to deal with. So I thank you for being here with me. This work is very near and dear to my heart, as you maybe know if you're familiar with my work. So I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit and share with you what it is exactly that we're going to be moving through with this time together today. I wanted to create, I leaped at the opportunity to create this workshop about looking at how we navigate relationships with friends, family, and loved ones after loss because of all the long list of things that I was absolutely not prepared for of what my life would look like after I had lost my little girl. One of the things that I feel like blindsided me the most was the massive ripples of change that happened in some of my relationships and finding that suddenly the outside world was such a different place to try to move through. And so for me, I had been working in the field of psychotherapy and the social work profession for nearly a decade before I went through my experience of loss. And people had said to me at that time, April, you might be better able to get through this because, this is the work that you do. But I fully just want to put out there this work is so much bigger than all of us. And I absolutely was taken out at the knees, just like anybody else would be, because that is just the magnitude of the experience. And I think that this is one of the disconnections that sometimes happens between us and the people around us who don't necessarily know or understand how big it really is and how much of ourselves and of our world and of our days change when we have to navigate loss. So I really just want to welcome you into the space. And I'm going to share with you this is basically my intentions for our time together today. I thought a lot about what I really needed and some of the key lessons that I've learned through this experience, and both through my own journey through this, as well as through the many, many conversations that I've now had with grieving parents and various clients, across the world at this point in time. And after I created the Love and Loss Project, as really just a space that I wanted to fill in some of this, you know, land of grief, to be able to offer people some support and some understanding and some practical tools and some practical ways of making some of this a little bit easier to carry. I think we well know nothing is going to take the pain of things away. It's about how do we make it just a little bit easier to carry. And one of the key places for me that I think that this really, really plays out in some ways so loudly is in our relationships with the people around us. So, my intentions for today is I'd like to share with you some hopefully new perspectives and ideas around why people might not be giving you the support that you absolutely deserve and that they should be giving you. I don't know if I'm alone in having that experience. I don't think I am. And looking at how we navigate some of the hurt and disconnections that might be coming up in some of those relationship moments, some of those hard conversations, as well as sharing some tips and ideas for maybe what might help make some of those conversations a little bit easier. I'm also going to share, my hope is that you also receive the workbook for this, where I have some questions that I want to offer you and also some tips and ideas for how to move through some of those challenging relationship dynamics and challenging, courageous conversations. And how we really protect our own heart, our own energy level, and our own well being as we're moving through this really vulnerable, important territory. And looking at how we, as the parents of our lost little one, and as the parents who are trying to move through this territory of life after loss, of how we carry our little one with us. And I just want to offer, as we move through this, full permission to be human here. And full permission to take a break if you need to share your thoughts in the chat, and to share your thoughts with me. So I'm going to provide my contact information here because I really love hearing from you. What stood out from you for this workshop today? What created a shift for you? And even just anything you want to share with me, or any questions that you come up. My goal for this time is to make it really as nourishing and practical and useful for you as possible. So this is the right place for you. If you have ever caught yourself thinking or been in the position of trying to wrap your head around why some of the people around you are doing the things that they're doing, why would they make their pregnancy announcement right now in this moment? Right? Why would she possibly expect that you would want to go to her baby shower? Why would they not invite you to the baby shower and leave out that option for you to even choose for yourself? If you've ever caught yourself thinking things like, I've always been there for them, why aren't they here for me? Why don't people seem to understand that this is such a big deal, that this is massive? And even just thinking about things of how we navigate relationship with our partners, if you're in a relationship, of why does he not want to talk about the baby, or why does she not want to talk about it, or what if my partner never recovers? These are all the things that I've had so many couples and people share with me in these private conversations that I've had with them, and that I've certainly thought my own self at various points in time. And so my hope is that this offers you something really valuable today too. I also want to request permission for my own self to be human through this experience. And so even though I'm a psychotherapist, even though I've been doing this work a long time, really please know that everything I'm sharing with you is just an offering or an invitation of an idea to consider. You are the expert on your world, your relationships, your circumstances, and feel free to take the parts of this that feel really useful and meaningful for you and just set aside the parts that don't. You have full permission here to just take what you need and leave what you choose. I also want to ask for that permission to be human in that I feel like this is a conversation that we actually need to be having a little more face to face. So I'm just going to stop my screen from sharing here just so we can see each other a little bit better because these are heart to heart conversations and I feel like we should be having them a little more face to face if that feels okay. So, as I really thought about what I wanted to offer you, one of the main things that I think I have gleaned through, my research and my conversation and my experiences is just this fundamental truth, this unfortunate kind of truth in a way that loss forces our relationships to change. They force us to change within that. And as I think back to my own experience of moving through this in the earlier, more difficult days of this, one of the things that, I realized was that I had had these patterns that I had had for a really long time. Patterns of people pleasing, patterns of putting other people's needs above my own, patterns of tolerating some crappy behavior from other people. And I didn't even notice that there was some relationships in my life that I had been carrying really more than my fair share of the weight or giving a lot more than I was getting back. I didn't even really notice that that was happening because up until the time when I experienced my loss, I could just make it work. I didn't really notice the extra weight because I was okay. And then when grief, kind of pulled me under the waves, pulled me under that ocean, and suddenly I found myself in this position where not only did I have nothing to give, right? Not only did I have no space to really take care of other people's problems or other people's requests of me, I also had to really suddenly now protect myself from other people's stuff. And I remember, really having to get clear on the fact of before I would pick up a phone call, before I would respond to a message that had come in, before I would agree to see somebody, I remember getting into the practice of asking myself, do I have energy to spend right now? That if this person says something insensitive, if this person changes the topic, right? Because we get a lot of those, or I got a lot of those conversations anyways, where people would call to see like, how are you? But then suddenly just change the topic and now want me to listen about your terrible boss or the millionth of fight that you've had with your partner or your bad day because you got parking tickets, right? Like I had no capacity to hold space for that kind of stuff anymore. And this is one of the things that grief essentially just takes from us. There's so many things that it takes from us. And one of those was that I could not be the same person that I had previously been in my friendships and in my relationships. And this question that I got in the practice of asking myself that I still use now because it's just, when we're grieving, it's essential survival skill. But just the rest of our time, it's just really good self care and conscious relationships, which is do I have energy to spend or to have subtracted from me if this person kind of just needs to drain me right now, right? Or if they say something that drops me down. What's the impact of me, right? How do I feel after I finish that conversation with somebody? Are they building me up or are they taking us down? And notice that this is really different than impact versus intention. back in the day, I used to tolerate all kinds of ridiculous behaviors. It's a little bit humiliating for me now when I think back of that, of in some of my dating relationships and some of my friendships. I would tolerate a lot of stuff because I got really hung up on the idea that they're not intending to hurt me. They're not intending to hurt me, so I should just kind of brush it off and move forward and be okay. And what I want you to consider as you're moving through this time period where you absolutely have to just be careful and gentle with your own heart, with your own mental health, with your own well being, we have to really give ourselves permission to step back and acknowledge that it's not just people's intention that counts. There's an impact, whether they intend to hurt us or not, whether they intend to drain our energy or not, whether they intend to be insensitive or not, there's an impact. So please give yourself permission that both of these things can be true, right? They can be a really good person and be negatively impacting you. You can really love them a lot and need to protect yourself from their energy, from their way of supporting you right now. And one of the things that, really shocked me was noticing that there was people that I would have gambled my mortgage, right? I would have like bet my house to say, this person, this girl, she's going to have my back through this. And it was shocking to realize that some of the people that I really expected to be there for me vanished, right? Instead of seeing them come closer and lean in and be a part of this and help me through, what I actually saw was them, the back of their head getting smaller and smaller. And this is part of the really hard stuff about it, is that there's times when we lose other people, when there's that effect of collateral loss. I think of one friend of mine who, avoided me. She stood me up, right? We had plans for her to come over and support me and be, my shoulder to cry on. And she would cancel on me with these ridiculous excuses until finally I said to her, like, what is going on? Because you've just canceled on me 3 times right now in the early weeks of my grief. And she said, April, I just don't know how to be around you right now. And I was really thankful for that moment of honesty. And to be honest, right now in this moment, it took me a while to still kind of sort through that relationship and to still kind of experience some other letdowns and some other, just a lot of selfishness in that relationship before I realized that that for me was one of those relationships that I had essentially been sustaining by overgiving. That was a person where really, as long as the focus was on them, they were happy to be here. And suddenly, when I could not provide that for them, when the spotlight in some ways was now on me and what I needed and my tragedy, they couldn't be there. Now, that was very different. And when I look back on it, that particular person had actually had a long history of small betrayals, small letdowns, sometimes big letdowns, right? When I actually stepped back and looked at it, there was, a long history of me essentially putting up with things that I probably should not have been putting up with. And this is where I say that, grief sometimes just acts like this house of mirrors where it forces us to kind of look in that reflection and see and notice things that we kind of turned a blind eye to before. And so, as you're moving through this, one question to maybe just check in on is, what has your relationship with that person been like? before you really needed them. Just check in. And you don't have to do anything with this just yet. This is just a moment to even start to entertain that idea of noticing not only intention, but impact. Because sometimes, even with the people that absolutely love you, that absolutely adore you, that absolutely want to be there for you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are skilled or capable or a safe person to invite into that space. So when I contrast that friendship and those conversations that I would have with her to another relationship in my life, a friend of mine got pregnant really shortly after I lost my daughter. And I was so not ready to be around babies. I was so not ready to be around pregnant people. It was just way too much for my soul to bear. And I remember calling her the one day and saying, you know, I'm really sorry, but I just can't really be there for you right now. It's just too close and too hard. And she said to me, April, I don't expect you to, and it's okay that you're not. And because two things had happened in that conversation that were really important. One, I took the brave moment of talking about the elephant in the room, talking about that tiny disconnection that was starting to build between us. And I did the brave thing of addressing it directly. And then she was able to have some empathy and give me permission to step back, right? To reassure me that it was okay that I stepped back. And she's somebody that I'm still really close with all these years later because we were able to give each other that space without making it personal. So I would encourage you to think about, is there someone in your life right now that you need to be more open with about where you're at and what you have to offer and what your experience really is? And one of the things that I hear from people that sometimes comes up is, well, they should know. They should just know that I'm heartbroken. They should just know how hard this is for me. They don't. I so wish they did. This would be so much easier if they did. But unfortunately, a lot of people just don't really get it. And they don't get it because I used to think that empathy was truly just a built in human thing. And now I really see it as a skill, like a superpower. And so some people just don't really have that ability to truly take on the perspective, to put themselves in your shoes. And so it might mean that they're a really good person and somebody that you want to maintain a close relationship with, but you're going to need to spell it out for them. You're going to need to give them the information. And I remember having a conversation with somebody, and she was talking about how a lot of distance had happened between her and one of her friends who had had a baby just after she had lost her little one. And that her friend really did not understand at all why she was not just able to come and be a part of this now happy thing that was happening, why she just couldn't, want to spend time with her newborn, why she was not really available or okay to do that. And the thing that I encourage her to think about and maybe consider sharing with that friend is just a bit of information, because part of what we're doing is truly having to educate other people, is to educate them on this idea that when you think about it, every baby looks like our baby. Every baby looks like that could have been our baby. And so, in the same way that if you had a woman who lost her husband, and let's say that husband had a twin brother who looked exactly like him, you would say, of course, going to have coffee with that brother would be so weird and so triggering and create such an upheaval for her. Of course, you would not necessarily expect that to be neutral, right? To go and have lunch with your deceased husband's twin brother. That would be a big deal. And yet, this is the expectation that as grieving parents of lost babies and lost pregnancies, we are bumping into all the time. People don't really know or understand that every baby represents our baby. Every baby looks like our baby. Every moment is the life that we could have been living. So you might want to think about the relationships in your life of who do you need to educate a little bit more about your experience? Who do you need to share a little bit more of information with? And the other really important thing that I want you to think about as you think about that maybe friend or family member where there is some disconnection and there is some tension, what is the story that you are telling yourself about why they are not giving you the support that they should be? What is the story that you're telling yourself? Why, when you're thinking in your head, what do you say of why they're not offering you that support? Because here's what I've come to really bear witness to over and over and over again. One of the phenomenons that we have to be really careful about as we're moving through relationships after loss is that when the people around you are not able to support you in the way that you sometimes deserve or need, we can tell ourselves, or it can feel like, oh my goodness, what if they just think I'm being attention seeking? What if they're just thinking that I'm making too big a deal about this? What if they're thinking that I should be fine now? What if they're thinking that something is wrong with me, that I'm as impacted as I am, or I need what I need, or I'm feeling how I'm feeling? Notice what the story is. And this is one of those moments that if you are hanging out with me a bit, you're going to hear me saying a lot. Grief functions like a mirror, right? All of our relationships function like a mirror. So what is it that mirror is showing you that's really your fear, your worry? And I'll give you an example of what I mean. I was talking to a client one time, and she was telling me about how hurt and offended and frustrated she was in that her in-laws were really distant through this experience. They wanted to still hang out with them. They wanted to still spend time with them. They still wanted them to come over every week for Sunday dinner. But there was not really any meaningful or genuine, connected acknowledgement of the fact that my client and her partner were in pain, right? Were absolutely hurting and grieving. The in-laws wanted to still spend time with them. They wanted them to still come over for Sunday dinner, but they wanted them to be fine while they were there. And then what would happen is my client would kind of make these bids for connection. She would make these bids of, kind of trying to let them in a little bit on what their experience was and where they were at, which is a great thing to do. But when people show you who they are, you gotta believe them. You gotta believe them. And so she would make these bids for connection where she would say, I did not sleep well last night, or I'm just really nervous because we've got this anniversary date coming up and I don't know how I'm going to get through it. She would have these moments of just being honest and trying to connect and trying to be understood. And each time she would get met with a bit of dismissal and a bit of invalidation, right? Where they would say something like, well, you just got to keep your chin up, or change the topic, just flat out not even respond and change the topic. And as I talked with her about, her hurt and her anger and how offended she was, one of the questions I asked her was, so let me ask you a question. Your father-in-law that has been, the worst culprit of this insensitivity, is he the kind of guy that has, that really takes responsibility in his own life for going deep? Does he have deep connections with his friends? Does he have meaningful conversations about what he's thinking or what his experience is? Is he somebody that basically swims in the deep end of the pool? Or is he somebody that always just floats in the shallow end and doesn't really engage with anything too real or significant? I'm like, does he have those conversations with his friends, right? Those heart to heart conversations. And she laughs and is like, oh my goodness, not at all. Like, this guy is so blocked. He is so, shut down. And I'm like, okay. So notice that he's not just like this with you, he is like this in every area of his life. So maybe you should stop going to McDonald's and trying to order filet mignon, because that's what you're doing right now. When people show you who they are, you need to believe them. And you essentially, by continuing to make these unreciprocated bids for connection, when you continue to open yourself up and be vulnerable and risk, that hurt and disappointment, and somebody continues to drop you and turn their back on you and leave you alone, yes, they're hurting you, but you are hurting you more by continuing to go to McDonald's and trying to order filet mignon. They just don't have it to give you. Doesn't mean that you are not worthy of it. Doesn't mean that this need is not important. Doesn't mean that your feeling is not valid. It means you need to go to the people that can meet you in the deep end of the pool. And that's really the criteria, for my life. And I think about it in terms of where I go for that heart to heart, right? Because we have people, family members and friends who can meet various different needs. Some people are just your activity buddy, right? She's never going to want to have a deep conversation with you. She never wants to hear the question of like, how are you really, right? But she's somebody that's always willing to get up and go to yoga or go for a walk. We have to be careful that we let people be who they are and we accept that they are who they are. The piece of that, the caution in that is we can't turn that into a story about what it means about us, that somebody else just isn't capable or that somebody else has their own blocks or limitations. The other thing that I see that we do a lot that really trips us up, and this happens particularly in intimate relationships with your partner, is we expect people to be mind readers. We use mind reading almost as a measurement of, do they love me? I'm going to judge how much do you love me based on how well are you able to read my mind and accurately guess what I need, what I want, what feels supportive for me. It is so different of what feels supportive for each and every person. I've talked to many women who say, I'm so hurt and offended that they would send me an invitation to come to their baby shower. I've also talked to so many couples that have said, we were so hurt and offended that they didn't send us an invitation for their baby shower. There's no real right or wrong here in terms of universal protocol. So the hard thing is that you have to just check in on what you need and what you want. And then you have to take responsibility for letting the other people around you know what that is. Because if you leave it up to them to guess, you're actually setting people up for failure. And you want to be especially cautious of this in your relationship with your partner. Do not set your partner up for failure. You need to share with them specifically what you need and want. The other thing that I see that happens, particularly in our relationships with partners, is one of the things I've heard from a lot of people is, how do I get my partner to open up more? And I'm always a little bit curious about one, what is it you're looking for in that? Are you looking to make sure that they are okay and you want to know what their internal experience is? Or is it that you are craving more connection and that you are looking for more support? And then one of the things that feels supportive for you is being able to talk about things more. So I want you to think about it like this. We give, particularly to our partners, the kind of support that we would want for ourselves. Let me explain it this way. I love candles and journals and chocolate. And so if you are part of my close circle, guaranteed for your birthday at some point in time, you have received a basket of journals and chocolate and candles because those are my favorite things, right? They're my favorite things. And so they're the things that I love to give because it's what feels great from my perspective. We give the kind of support that we're looking for. So this is a good opportunity to notice how your partner experiences closeness and connection. Maybe they're not necessarily wanting to talk and talk as much as you are, but maybe they're actually just wanting that quality time of being with you. And maybe there's there's just that thing of sometimes our needs don't always line up at the same time. One person is craving closeness at the same time that somebody else is craving privacy and space. And it can be really hard to navigate that with each other, which is why these check-ins are so important. Brene Brown has this great example where she talks about how she will share with her husband when something gets triggered or when she finds herself kind of starting to spin or get upset about something. She'll say, okay, can you just share with me what's going on right now? Because the story that I'm telling myself is this, this, this. And it's always the stories that upset us. It's the stories that, are often causing the pain. Sometimes it's not so horrible that somebody's needing time to themselves in a different way than you are. It's the story that we tell ourselves about what that means. And so when we practice checking in with each other and sharing with them, I'm asking because it actually makes me feel better to kind of know where you are. Or I know it's hard for you to kind of sit here and listen to me, but talking about it actually makes me feel better. So I would just really love it if you could just sit here and just let me talk. And I say this to my partner all the time because he is a fix it kind of guy. So in the past, if I started talking about something, he would kind of start jumping in somewhere with solutions or maybe this or maybe that. And you're like, no, like, what are you doing? Don't do that. So, because sometimes we're talking about it just to process it with our own self. So you can do your partner a really big favor by identifying what is your own need. So I will say to him, can you just listen? I just need to talk this through out loud. And I have no idea whether he's thinking about his guitar lessons or work he has to do tomorrow, or whether he is fully following every single word I say. It doesn't matter because in that moment, I just need to talk through it out loud, and his presence just helps me does that. And I relieve him of this pressure and confusing role of trying to have the right answers and trying to have solutions for me. This is sometimes just one of the differences between us and our partner, right? If he was talking out loud about a problem, it would be because he's looking for my input. He's looking for my suggestions, right? He's reached a roadblock in figuring it out, problem solving in his own way, right? And that's when he opens it up to others. I open it up from the gate. Talking to somebody else is my way of moving through it. So just notice and know that you need what you need. It's okay. This is one of the most difficult parts of moving through grief. And when I say that it essentially not just invites us, but forces us to change. And one of the things that it forces us to really step into is often this very new and foreign concept that you are so worthy of care and support and receiving the goodness that you offer to other people, and starting to ask for that in some really direct, honest ways. It is okay to be hurting. It is okay to be impacted. You're allowed to be here for this. There's nowhere else to be. So I would love to hear from you, what you're taking from this conversation and what stood out the most to you. I'm on Instagram at With Love April, and I'm always happy to connect in my messages. And you can also always find me at aprilboyd.ca. So I thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your courage and showing up for yourself and for being a part of holding this space with each other. All right. Thanks. Take care.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amy, and this is my husband, Chris Manning. We had our daughter, Grace Manning, in February of 2016. I gave birth to her at 33 weeks and 3 days. We were at our last prenatal class, and I wasn't feeling a lot of movement that day. So I had been counting kicks and weren't feeling anything. So after class, we actually went up to triage, and she was delivered via emergency C-section. She was taken right away to a specialized hospital for kids. And a couple days later, we were given the diagnosis that she was not going to live. They weren't quite sure what had happened, but that she had suffered some trauma while she was still in my tummy, and they weren't sure how much time we would have with her. So we spent 3 days in hospital with her, and then the remaining 5 in hospice care. And when she was 8 days old, she passed away. And we've just been living with our grief ever since and trying to sort out our new normal. We've since had a subsequent pregnancy and have a son, Carter, who's here, who is 4. And yeah, I think just over the years, it's always a challenge to try and live with your grief and continue on. And I guess our relationship and the relationships around you definitely change. So we thought we would come here today and kind of speak on our experience and hopefully help out others going through the same thing.
What she said.
I second that.
All right. My name's Joey, and this is my wife, Danielle. In 2017, we lost our pregnancy at
We're about 14 weeks along. Yeah. We found out that we were 12 weeks along, and we had our scan. And at first we thought everything was fine. We waited until that scan, the 12-week scan, to announce it at our engagement party, where we had, I think, like 80 people there. So we had this huge announcement, and then on the following, I believe it was the following day, it was Mother's Day, we got a phone call from our doctor, just our family doctor, saying that there was something wrong with the baby's head size. So obviously we didn't take that news very lightly, and though we had a friend who worked at a doctor's office, told us, you know, this happens all the time, it's fine, you'll go get another scan and everything will be great. We kind of did have a little bit of an inkling that something may not be right, and we just kind of hoped for the best and expected the worst. And we did get to Mount Sinai at around, I think we had to wait about 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks.
To get that scan. And so we did go to the hospital in Toronto and get the scan done, and they found out that the baby basically didn't develop a skull. So it's called exencephaly. It's just a rare neurological condition. And there wasn't really a reason at the time, but then we kind of found out that because this pregnancy was unplanned, I was on blood thinners at the time that were not safe for pregnancy. And though we knew that, I think that's where a lot of the guilt comes from. But anyways, that could have been possibly a reason why the baby did develop this, which is, it's somewhat reassuring because we know that it possibly wasn't just a fluke. For our subsequent pregnancies, we're very cautious and nervous about getting pregnant again. So we ended up having to have a DNC. It was left up to us. The doctors did tell us that we could decide if we wanted to wait to find out the baby's gender, if we wanted to even deliver the baby. That was totally up to us, but he did recommend having a DNC because the baby would not survive even an hour. So we couldn't handle that and putting this baby through unnecessary pain. So we decided to have a DNC, which was the hardest decision we've ever had to make. It still weighs on us every single day, but we know we made the right decision. So we're very lucky to have had each other through this. And we had been together for over 10 years. So we were prepared in the sense of being together for a really long time and knowing how each other coped with things. So yeah.
And we do in last May in 2020, we did have another pregnancy, and now we also have a little boy named Carter, and he's happy, healthy, and we just like Amy and Chris, we just want to spread awareness and talk about things that don't really come to light too often with pregnancy and infant loss. So there's a lot of people going through it. One of our friends just went through it, so this is an honor being able to spread this awareness. So yeah,
I think that's it.
Okay, so how would you describe some of the biggest challenges that your relationship faced after your loss and some of the biggest changes?
you guys want to go or us?
You guys can go.
I think, especially after something like this, it was very traumatic for both of us. Obviously, the mom has the physical part of it, and us dads, I feel we have to be the protectors. At least myself, I had to be the protector, and I constantly wanted to fix Danielle and make everything better. And we leaned on each other, and we've been very open with each other, talking about our feelings. She's let me be vulnerable around her, something that I haven't been able to do with anybody else. So that was my saving grace. I got to talk about my feelings and stuff, but also when I left home and I wasn't talking with Danielle and stuff, I had to deal with it on my own. So, and everyone deals with it in their own way. But I think our communication and our trust for one another, and ability to lean on one another.
And I think just like learning how each other copes and giving each other the space to feel those things is a challenge for any relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And just recognizing that you do grieve differently and that you really are kind of on your own in this, but all you can do is kind of support each other and help each other through whatever the other person needs, as long as you're there.
Like we've been through many different issues. We've been through cancer treatment with Danielle, a pulmonary embolism. So we knew how to support each other. Obviously not with this aspect. It's always hard. It doesn't matter if it happens once, twice, or however many different things happen to you. It never gets, you never know exactly what to say, what to do. So it's constant learning. Even now, even 4 years later, we're still kind of learning, and it still hits us. Like today, leading up to this interview, both of us got emotional at different times, thinking about different things. So it does still, there is still a learning curve there with both of us learning how to deal with it. So
I think for us, it was definitely a choice that we made very, like, while we were still at Emily's house, that we kind of said to each other, we've lost Grace, but we can't lose each other through this. And, you know, the stats for relationships in general are not great. And then you add a loss in, and there's not really an in between. It doesn't seem like there's really an in between. You either like come out of this stronger or you don't make it through. And I remember saying to Chris, like, I can't lose you. Like, we've lost her, but I cannot lose you through this too. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. You know, marriage is hard to begin with, and you throw this in where, you know, nobody teaches you how to deal with this kind of thing. I don't think that grief is spoken about a lot, or we're not really taught much about grief to begin with. And so when you lose a child, which is the complete opposite of how life is supposed to work, you know, so many don't know what to say. They don't know how to cope with it, because we don't know how to cope with grief to begin with. So how are you supposed to, you know, deal with something that's unthinkable? And so it's definitely been a really big learning curve, and something we've had to fight through. I think in ways it was easier in the beginning, because we were both just destroyed. We were both in this place, and we knew the emotions we were both feeling for the most part at the same time. We were feeling it in different ways, but I think that really heavy grief is kind of similar. But as time goes on, and that grief changes and our journey changes, I think for me it's been a little harder, to continue to remember that not only am I grieving, but so is Chris, and we're doing that in different ways and in different stages. So
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about us wanting to be protectors. And, you know, that's for me has been the biggest challenge, is that I want to fix everything. And something like this can't be fixed at all. And all you can do is, and what I've had to learn is that rather than try to fix something that can't be fixed, I have to learn the best ways to support her and make sure that I can provide the, you know, what she needs, or as best I can, what I can do to help her get through different stages and different instances of grief and things like that, because there is no fix for it.
yeah, the
Um,
emotional support, right?
yeah, exactly. And I think for her, you know, like she was right in the beginning, we were both just destroyed. I wanted to be a dad since I was a kid. I've had my kids' names picked out since I was like very young. That's always been who I've been. I've always, you know, everybody always, oh, you're going to be a great dad. I'm like, I hope so. I really want to be. And so like I was destroyed. And since then, you know, I probably have been less demonstrative of my grief than she has. She's broken down more than I have since then, and I typically now tend to bottle it up more, and then, you know, explode at the most random times with tears or anger or things like that. And that's something that we have, you know, we've struggled with understanding the way that each other grieves now. You know, I was driving home from watching the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie, listening to music in my car, had nothing to do with Grace whatsoever, and just like ugly crying in my car down the highway on the way back from the movie theater. And I got home and told Amy, I'm like, I just ugly cried for 25 minutes, because I was feeling bad about Grace, and like it just came out of nowhere. And that's, for me, it's been mostly stoic, because I still feel like I need to be that protector, and need to be the confident, calm one. But it still bottles up, and you're still like destroyed inside. And when it comes out so much. And that has been something that the two of us have had to learn from each other, you know, how we're dealing with things, and mostly accept that we don't deal with things the same way. And that, you know, the way that I handle things, the way that I deal with things, the way that helps me heal, might not be something that she understands. And the way that she heals and the way that she deals with things might not be something that I understand. But our job, I guess, is to be there to say, hey, it's okay. You do what you've got to do, as long as you're not harming yourself or anything like that. But you know, deal with things the way that you do. And if you want to talk to me about it and you want to communicate with me why you're feeling that way or why you're acting that way, then that would be helpful for both of us, so that we have that understanding of, yeah, I'm ridiculous right now. I'm just going through something and I'm dealing with some grief right now. And please accept that I will be back to normal or back to somewhat normal soon, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we were just talking about this today, how Danielle admitted at times if I was having a good day or if I came home and I was excited about something or watching sports, something that she felt guilty if she felt a certain way or if she felt down. She didn't want to ruin my day. But that's
Like bring you down to my
Yeah.
level again.
yeah, and I just had to reassure her, like, if she's not having a good day, I'm not having a good day, right? I want to be on that same emotional level, and I want to be there to support her, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's the thing. I hope that this kind of gets the message out that moms, you can be emotional. That's what we're here for. Chris, you feel the same. That's what we're here for, is a shoulder to cry on. Sometimes, like you said, we need that shoulder to cry on too. It may not be the biological effect of actually being pregnant, having the changes in your body, but we are there, and and we feel it emotionally too. And just like you, Chris, I wanted to be a father ever since I was a little kid. I wanted my son named Carter ever since I was a little kid, right? So it's just it is hard, and there is that guilt, and there's so many emotions that flow through all of us, right? So it's just you just have to learn how to accept it and help each other deal with it, really.
I think the communication, like how you had said, you really tried to communicate. And I think that has definitely been the thing that has helped us through the most too, because it's, as we went through that journey and after that first, those first couple of weeks when you're like right in it, as we progressed through, and it was, being able to even just say, I don't know why I'm upset today, but I'm really upset. And that was enough. And then he knew to kind of like, okay, so I'm not just, upset or, snipping at him for some odd reason. Like, it's not what is actually happening, it's what's behind it. And I think that's definitely helped as we've moved forward, to be able to identify that, like, it's not whatever is happening in that moment that's actually the upsetting part. It's something that's underlying that then has to do with the grief. And that kind of helps along the way of those big fights and kind of controlling them and not making them blow up so much, for sure. So
Even talking about like the uncontrollable, Chris, as you were saying, like just ugly crying in your car. I just remember one specific example of, I went to a doctor's office. I think I was just sick. I just needed whatever. I don't know why I was there, but it was not long after we lost our baby, and Joey was with me. And I just remember all of a sudden I just broke down. I saw a little kid in the waiting room and I just looked at them and I wanted that. And I just felt terrible in that moment. And I don't know, like, obviously that was a trigger for me, but I don't know where it came from. Like, I couldn't control it. I was super embarrassed because I was crying like I was blubbering in the waiting room like a little baby, and Joey was just trying to console me. So it's random things like that that you really have no control over. You don't know when the grief is going to hit you. It comes in waves. That's what, I like that quote, that grief comes in waves, because even years down the road, sometimes just something triggers you and your person is there to support you. So I think that's been another big challenge, that you kind of have to just be there for that person no matter what the circumstance, and accept that it could just happen in the middle of a public area.
it's usually where it happens, always.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that really helped me, because I know I've struggled a lot with grief, with the guilt, just of random things even. And I know I would feel guilty. And I know you kind of touched on that, Joey, about like, Danielle would say, I didn't want to bring down your day because I was having a bad day. And when we realized that, kind of luckily for us, our grief kind of, whether it was our bodies knowing that we needed to be okay for the other person, or I don't know what it was, but it seemed a lot of times that, like, when I was having those awful days, Chris was managing, and then when he was having his, I was managing. And I know at first I felt guilty about the days where I like couldn't keep it together and he had to like deal with life and deal with me. But then I realized that, like, and Chris had said that to me, it was like, imagine if we were both having these kind of days together, and like we wouldn't be able to function. So it's good that, you know, however this is working out, that we're, you know, able to support one another, because we seem to be having them on off, like on different days. And so I think that's also something to kind of, if that's what's happening in your situation, that it might be a blessing that, you know, you're able to be there for each other because of however you're kind of grieving, and to not feel guilty about that. And it's a good thing that you're able to support each other in those ways.
I think like you all bring up such valid points. Like we don't talk about grief at all in our society, especially pregnancy and infant loss.
Yeah.
And everybody does grieve in completely different ways. So what would you share with everyone who's going through this now, like how to navigate their way through the early days of grief?
I would generally say allow yourself to feel what you need to feel, and forgive yourself for having negative thoughts about every person you see who has a baby, or anybody you know who maybe wasn't as careful as you while they were pregnant and still got to have a healthy baby, because you're going to have so many negative thoughts and so many negative feelings about those things, and then you're going to feel like a jerk about it. But you shouldn't feel like a jerk, because that's how you're honestly feeling. And like, with the exception of my best friend, anybody who had a little girl, for like 3 years after we lost Grace, I was just like, why do you get to have a healthy little girl? And it's so awful to like to think that, but it was healthy for me to feel that way. I needed to get out the anger, and that was an easy way for me to do it without actually offending anybody, because I did it to my wife. I said it to my wife, and I said it to people in group and things like that. And like my sister got pregnant shortly, or my sister's wife got pregnant shortly after, and we like literally were like, please don't let it be a girl. Please don't let it be a girl. And it was a boy. But it would have been rough on it. I mean, I would absolutely still love her if she was a girl, but it would have been definitely harder in the beginning. So my recommendation would be just to allow yourself to feel the things that you need to feel. Allow yourself to be angry. Allow yourself to be sad. Don't feel guilty if you have 3 hours where you don't feel sad or angry, where you're watching a television show or a movie to give yourself something positive to think about. Don't feel guilty about that either. Allow yourself to feel the feelings you're feeling. And understand that no two people are going to grieve the same anyways. You're not going to grieve the same as your significant other. You're not going to grieve the same as another couple that you've met. There might be tons of similarities, but there's still going to be differences as well. And there's, you know, and just forgive yourself and allow yourself to have that, because your body is doing what it needs to do. And if you have, 6 hours of numbness where you don't feel like the world is caving in on your face, that's your body protecting you, and that's what you need, because so much of that time is spent feeling horrible and angry, and those are completely natural feelings and completely natural thoughts. I'm still angry so many times about it, and I understand that. I allow myself to say like, hey, you can still be angry because it was the worst.
I think definitely this isn't really at the beginning, because I think, Chris, you're right. You just need to feel all of the feelings and just be mad at the world. Like you just lost your child. You are allowed to be upset and angry and take it to heart. I think later on, when you do start becoming a little bit more social, because I know that I didn't want to talk about it. I would talk about it with Joey and some of my close friends, but it was hard to go out in public. So I didn't want to go to therapy or do anything. I did reach out to my doctor once I was feeling okay I was actually, when I was feeling my worst, actually, I went to see my doctor, and I knew that I needed therapy or something. And then I just think that going to group and talking to other people, we met, Amy and Chris, and a lot of other couples going through very similar situations. And I think it is important to recognize that because they aren't the same situation, it doesn't mean you can't grieve. us being such an early loss, and pretty much everybody else in the group having either a stillbirth or something similar, or losing their child 8 days later, I think that it is very important to talk about it openly with somebody else experiencing a loss of their child, because even if you do experience the exact same situation, like Chris said, there's going to be differences, and you're not going to handle it the same way, and you're not going to have the exact same feelings as somebody else, even if it's the exact same situation. So I think that going to therapy, or at least talking to other people who have been through the loss of their child, is something I would recommend to anybody going through this. And just seeking help, just talking about your baby, talking to your friends.
And just like Chris said, like, let your emotions come in waves. And if you're crying consistently for 4 days, let it happen. Drink some water so you're not dehydrated, but let it happen.
It's gonna happen.
It's going to happen. It's not a natural thing to lose a child. Like Amy said, it's not the natural way of things. So, and I've seen people who don't live the nicest ways of life, and don't even want kids, and they've had kids before us, and they're happy, healthy kids. And it was just, I felt that guilt. You're allowed to feel guilt. You're allowed to feel anger, sadness. You're allowed to feel scared. And if all of a sudden you do feel like you're having a good day, don't feel guilty about that. Just let those days come, because every now and then you need those days too. There's no timeline for this grief to feel sad or angry. This is 4 years for us. Was it 6-7 years for you guys?
Almost 5.5. Yeah.
5.5. Yeah. So yeah. And it still hurts. So, but the early stages, it's going to really take a toll on you, and you just gotta let it happen, let it come naturally. Don't try and suppress everything. Obviously, you have to be strong at some points, but let it come, and kind of deal with it as you.
And I think too, like, if we're talking about communication and being open to people, one thing for me anyway, social media is a huge thing in our days, and I think that it can be used in a good way for seeking out. Like, that's how I found out about therapy. Talking to people through there and connecting with people is a really good thing. But other times, my biggest thing is don't go on social media when you've lost a baby, because when you see those baby announcements, you see pictures of people's kids running around, and all you want to do is just shut it off. And that is probably one of the biggest triggers. So I just recommend try to stay away from it unless you're trying to connect with other people or you feel comfortable sharing your story. Then that's a great outlet as well. So I think the more open you can be, that's great. But at the same time, some people don't grieve that way and can't be that way. So that's okay too, as long as you're trying to connect with people or at least stay as open as you can.
I think definitely finding your community. So, for us, group was a really big part of that. I know I made Chris come with me because I didn't want to go by myself, and it ended up being something that I think he found helpful as well.
Oh, yeah.
But even if you don't feel comfortable going to a group, or if you don't, everybody, we keep saying everybody grieves differently. Everybody's journey is different as well. But there are so many resources out there. They may not always be the easiest to find, but find your community. So if it's going to group, if it's finding a Facebook group where you can just kind of even just not even have to participate, but just being able to read through and, hearing other people's stories so that you don't feel so alone. There's some really great books that can connect you with other people's stories or other situations. So just really trying to find what helps you, whether, therapy, talking to somebody, being out in nature, journaling, like any of those things. Everything is going to work differently for other people, but just not giving up and continuing to try, even if one thing doesn't work. I know we had a very, very awful experience with therapy right off the hop. We took up a recommendation from the hospital, and it was actually a doctor who does therapy as well, and she's a pediatrician, and so they actually had us in the pediatrician's office and in the waiting room, and then she was running late, so we sat in a pediatrician's office for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And we ended up, I couldn't do it, and we ended up leaving before we even saw the doctor. And it was just, if we had stopped there, or if I had given up trying to find somebody that I could connect with, I don't think it would have gone well. Because down the road, I definitely needed that form of communication and to get me on the path that I am. So there's going to definitely be some really hard moments as you're trying to find the help that you need for yourself. And I would just say, don't give up. When those little speed bumps come, take the time you need to kind of push through it, but definitely find that community and find the resources that work for you, because you need that to continue on, and it's going to be something you live with for the rest of your life. You're never ever going to get over it. You're always going to remember. So you just have to try and find a way where you can live your life in a way where you can honor your child, and still continue to live your life.
The other thing that I wanted to touch on, Danielle was talking about social media. One thing that there is a benefit for, and I agree with her, like you see so many babies and stuff, and it's really tough. So you might want to mute a lot of people on your social media, but you can also use it, like if you want help and you're looking for help, ask and look for it. There are lots of people like the four of us who want to help whenever we can. I know I have a pin post on my Twitter that talks about losing grace, and how if anybody who sees that knows anybody who needs help, to please reach out to me. And there's tons of people like that. And there's just from the responses I've gotten from that tweet, having people say that's amazing. I had a similar situation. I live in Oregon, and somebody had posted something on one of our Facebook groups and just said like, hey, I lost a child a while ago, and if anybody ever needs help with this, and somebody tagged me in it, and it was a post from 2 years prior, and they were able to speak to somebody and get help. And so like if you're looking for help and you want help, ask for it and look for it. There's going to be a ton of people in your life who are awkward and maybe uncomfortable and are not the kind of people that you're going to want to continue getting help from. But when like Amy said, when you keep trying and you find the right person or the right people who are there, or the right program that's able to give you help, it's worth it. So I would definitely recommend, if you feel like you need help, asking for it. And some people don't want it right away, and that's totally fine as well. But if you're struggling and you're not feeling like you're getting the support that you need, or that you need more support, then I would definitely recommend reaching out.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Joey, did you want to share something?
Just agree.
Just to keep going on that though, like all of you are right, like community and people support, like networks and their support systems are what can be like crucial in helping them as they like work through their grief. But sometimes like people don't know how to ask for help or what to ask for help with. So what were some of the things, like how did your guys' support system like help you, or how have they helped you, and like how did you communicate like what you needed to them?
I think
Oh, sorry, you go. No, go.
I think for me, group was like a game changer, because it connected you with other people that knew exactly how you felt. So no matter how their loss happened, they'd still gone through that loss. And then you come into a community where everybody has these different resources. So you hear all these different stories, and you hear people at different stages. So, obviously when we first started going, it was very early on. But when we were at group, like our facilitators were also had losses, and they were further out. And so they were able to share what helps them. And you pick up on little things that you're like, oh, like I feel like that would help me, or oh, maybe I need to look into that. And it's something you never even thought of, because nobody knows how to do this. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, there's no guidebook, right? So it's finding what works for you. And I think my biggest thing now looking back would be to listen to your body and to yourself. I was struggling a lot with depression, and I was super anxious. And we, at first we thought, okay, it's just that this is loss and grief. I was seeing a therapist from very early on and all the way through. And I then had some medical stuff happen. So we thought that, what I was feeling was maybe due to that. And last year, I finally, I was through a few new therapists, and I finally said to my new therapist, I said, I can't feel like this anymore. Like, I felt like this for 4 years, and like, I understand that I've lost my child and I'm going to be sad about that, but like, this isn't normal. And now I'm on medication. And it was literally, probably within 2 weeks, like, I couldn't believe the difference. And the fact that, I had seen other therapists and like this hadn't gotten picked up on. And I had even pushed a few times and said, like, I feel like maybe I need to be on medication, or like, what, like, pushing for myself. And no, you've gone through a loss, or different things that way. And now looking back, it's like how I feel now, like, if I would have been able to have that years ago, like, how would that have affected my journey? And, so I think listening to yourself and knowing that, like, if you feel like something's not right, unfortunately, you really do have to advocate for yourself and, go and see somebody else, keep pushing for like those answers until you get what you need, because it can be a game changer.
I think that's a really good point, that like you yourself have to be your number one support system in any way that you can, and anything that you recognize. And that's where, like they pointed out earlier, is that communication is so key. And, she would say to me, like, I feel like something's wrong and I need to deal with that. And I would say, speak to a therapist. And then she would speak to a therapist and they would say, oh no, you lost a baby, everything's great. And eventually she was able to self-advocate and push, that way. And literally night and day, between the way that she appears to others and the way that she comes off, and the way that I've been able to see her level of confidence and happiness and things like that over the past while. It's been amazing. And so thank goodness she was able to self-advocate for herself. I did want to touch on another area. You were talking about the support system, and one of the things that for us, and again, this is never going to be for everybody, we were really adamant that we wanted people to talk about grace, and we wanted grace to still exist in the world. And so we were really big saying to our parents and our family, we want to talk about grace, and saying to our close friends, we want to talk about grace. And there's some people who aren't going to want to do that. There are some people who, some people come from a generation where, there was a lot of child loss and nobody ever talked about it, and that's just how things were. And some people are just uncomfortable talking about it. Some people will want to talk about it and will say the worst things. And for us, I mean, our decision was, I would rather hear people talk about grace and it be awkward and bad than to have nobody ever talk about grace. So we were very vocal to our friends and to our family to talk about her and to ask us about her and things like that. And, and again, that's not going to be for everybody, but let the support system in your life know what you want. And if you change your mind, that's also okay. If you want people to talk about the child and then you realize, no, maybe I don't, you just tell people, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Or if at first you're like, I don't want to talk about it right now, it's just going to make me cry. And then 3 weeks later, you know what, all I want to do is talk about my kid. You tell them that then, because the people who matter and the people who are your family, and I don't just mean your mom and dad and whatnot, I mean the people who in your life are there forever, will be able to do that. And we've been so lucky. Our support system has been amazing, from our family to our friends to group to the people we've met, to you guys. I mean, like every person we've met and has become a part of our journey has been so awesome and instrumental in us being able to heal to the level we have. And obviously we still have tons of, like, so much, like tons of places to go and so much healing left to do. But because of the support system we have, I feel like we've been able to be as, successful as we have in our healing.
I feel the exact same way. I think that group for sure, not only like similarities between losing a child, but also growing friendships and just like being able to talk about our babies openly and not having to feel like you're tiptoeing around the subject. I think that that's really important because we have quite a few friends who like mutual friends of ours that one of my best friends had years struggling trying to get pregnant, and we found that we would go for coffee and just feel the exact same feelings with going through complete opposite situations, but we would both be angry at the world and why can't we have this healthy child that we see everybody else have and all of that. So going for little coffee dates and just talking about it. And we had a couple friends who left food on our doorstep and with a little note, like super supportive. And one of my friends got me a journal so I could write down my feelings and stuff like that, like things that you don't really think about because like we talked about too, you guys mentioned, even we don't know, there's nothing you can say that's the right thing to say in the moment. You just have to be there for somebody going through the loss of a child. And just how you guys were mentioning, talking about grace, like we are very open about talking about our baby. We don't have a name for our baby because we didn't know if it was a girl or boy. We just didn't feel right naming the baby, but we just call them our little us, and we do talk about them. And I think it does catch a lot of people off guard sometimes, and it does feel like we kind of tiptoe around it sometimes. And even I feel awkward bringing it up with people who haven't been through that, because I just think, how are they going to react when I say, like, even if somebody asks you how many kids you have, I kind of take a step back and say, well, I don't want to explain my whole life story. So I say I have one child, but in my head, in my heart, and I'm just sitting there going, well, I really have two, but so it's having those supportive people that know your story and you feel comfortable explaining it to and being open with. But I definitely think for me personally, having this guy by my side has been my biggest support, and we're each other's rock. And we always say we're on each other's team, and that's what we said in our vows, and we'll say it every day. So.
And I find when this happened, I went back to work pretty early on, within a couple of days. That's just something I always put 12 hours a day and 10 hours a day. And so that was just kind of get it off my own mind. And as soon as it happened, I had no clue, but I found out 4, 5, 6 people at my work went through the similar thing, either a pregnancy or infant loss. And there's people that had multiple in between children and in between their children that they have now and stuff. So it's just, as soon as it's brought out into the world, you find out so much more.
Eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's just, you don't know how many people, you think you're the only one. And I know we had that feeling where you just feel so alone, and why did this happen to us? But you don't realize that so many other people this happens to, right? So and then another form of an outlet was playing basketball, playing golf, stuff like that. I just had to get out of my system. And talking to Danielle, a lot of my friends unfortunately kind of stepped away and didn't really know how to talk about it, how to console me, or how to even act around me anymore, right? So I found who
was supportive.
Yeah, who my community was, and and obviously the group that we went to, it was amazing. And actually seeing that other fathers were going through this really helped, like you and Matt. And there's so many people that are going through this, and it was just refreshing, because I thought I was one of the only fathers that were going through this. And I remember, I think the first 2 times I ended up breaking down, because I was so emotionally involved in this, right? And actually seeing other fathers going through the exact same thing I was, it's refreshing.
Yeah, it's hard to find that community, like we said, like especially dads, like there's not a lot of light shone on them, and it's not fair because like we talked about, like we went through cancer and an embolism. Well, that was all me physically going through it and Joey supporting me. Well, this time this was both of us going through the exact same thing. And yes, of course, I carried the baby and I had the physical toll of the DNC, but him feeling those feelings every single day alongside me was just totally different. So finding other supports was super important, especially when you're grieving together, but you're still grieving alone, because him going off to work, I can't really support him while he's at work. And I'm at home trying to complete a cardiac course that my brain is definitely not into at the time. So I don't know how that went, but yeah, definitely finding those people. And even I wanted to bring up too, even having those people and not knowing how to approach them, because I personally felt, and I don't even know how to explain this, I felt embarrassed. That's a silly word to use, but that's kind of what I felt, because we did have that huge announcement at our engagement party and all of our close friends and family were there. The next day, hearing the news and just having that feeling of, oh my God, like we lost our baby and we just told the world about it. And having that feeling of, I don't know how I'm going to face the world, let alone my friends. And I remember we had a softball game and I couldn't go. I was trying really hard to get out of bed and I just couldn't. And Joey ended up going, and I just said, I can't face them. I feel embarrassed and I just can't see people right now. I just felt super antisocial and depressed. And I think that's important to point out, that it is normal to feel those feelings, and it's just giving yourself time. And also your support group, them recognizing that all you need is time. You can be there for them and you can say all the right or wrong things, but you really do. I think the most important is just realizing that we need time.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on what you were saying about the difficulty in being able to see your friends and stuff afterwards and having to tell them what had happened. We were generally pretty good. We put out some stuff on social media and stuff to our friends. But for me, I also went back to work fairly quickly, and I didn't want to have to deal with it from people who weren't my friends, who were people that I just sort of knew at work. So I reached out to two people at my work who I was very close with, explained the situation to them and just said, hey, maybe if you could let everybody know so that they don't come and ask me in a month where the baby is, and I won't have to deal with that. And so that might be useful for some people if they, some people may not even want to tell their friends or members of their family, or they can reach out to somebody else and just say like, hey, maybe you could let these people know and tell them that I don't want to talk about it right now, but when I do, I'll definitely reach out. That would be super helpful to me. And again, that might not work for everybody, but I found that for me at work, it was super helpful. I have only had a couple of super awkward moments with people at work. I did have one girl who I was super glad. I couldn't believe that she didn't know. She came out, she's like, oh my, is the baby born? And I was like, you're going to want to sit down. And then I felt so awkward and guilty about having to tell her this and see this horrified look on her face. And that's what I was trying to avoid. I didn't want to feel guilty about telling somebody else about my baby dying. And so it ended up being a monster help, because I'm a very social guy. Everybody at work knows me. I have a large building with a ton of people and everybody knows me. And so having, those guys reach out to everybody for me was a big help. And again, that might not work for everybody, but for me, I found it helpful.
I think coming up with some kind of game plan, because depending on where you were in your pregnancy, people know, right? So I had my baby shower a week before. So we had all of the stuff, and, I was at 33 weeks. So like the nursery was finished, and I also, my mother and I own a business, and it's a small business, and everybody knows me, and I'd been pregnant and they had been going through the pregnancy with me. So I also had that, and to kind of come up with a game plan of how you want to deal with people finding out. And one of the biggest struggles I had was I didn't want to put it on social media. I felt like it just felt so wrong, and it was none of anybody's business. And, you know, it was, the whole thought of it just really didn't sit well with me. And I ended up, for work, putting it on our social media channels, because when I was going to be going back to work was going to be one of our busiest times. And a lot of the people wouldn't have seen me between when they knew I was supposed to have the baby and when they were coming in. So they would have just assumed that she made it here and everything was good. And I realized that I would have to have that conversation over and over and over again at work, in a work setting. And that thought was even worse than the thought of having to post something. So I ended up making this decision with Chris that we would put it on social media where we could control the narrative and we could kind of get it out there. And as much as I hated it, it definitely made that transition back to work easier for me. You know, you still had some people that had those awkward, you know, looks or whatever, but you also knew that was going to happen. And because it was a busy time at work, I already had a game plan of how to walk away from that and be able to be like, oh, look, another customer, like, excuse me, right? Because you know, you start to know what's going to come. You know, the types of questions that start to come, and you know how to then divert them. So I think definitely coming up with some kind of plan for yourself on how you would like to handle it. It helps you to feel more in control and to control the narrative. Go ahead.
Okay. I think if I would want to say anything to anybody who's new to this awful reality, is just simply to let yourself feel what you need to feel. As well as you can, communicate with people and let them know how you're feeling, and let them know what you need. And most of all, just forgive yourself for being angry, even if you think it's unreasonable. Forgive yourself for crying all the time, even if you think it's unreasonable. Just know that your body is trying to help you heal. And the best thing that you can do is allow yourself to feel the feelings, allow yourself to, experience the pain, the anger, all of that, and the joy that you feel guilty about. Allow yourself to feel that too, and communicate with everybody what it is that you need, or communicate with the people that you think will help you, or the people that have shown that they will help you. What you need, or what can help you, or what you think can help you, or what you want to try. And if it's not working, communicate that too, and try something new. But most of all, just understand that you're going to feel that way, and allow yourself to feel it, and communicate.
I would probably say just that you're not alone. I hope that you feel that whether it's somebody you know or somebody you don't, whether it's us talking to you today, I hope you feel a little less alone, and know that there are unfortunately a lot of people that are in the same position that you are in right now, who have gone through it, who have made it through it, and that are here if you need them. And I always like to say that your child is also not alone. We always say whenever we would go to group that, while we were at group, the kids were all up in heaven playing together. So if you're watching this right now and you've lost your child, I just want you to know that your child's not alone, and that Grace is up there helping and playing and looking out for them. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Way to make us tear up. I think I just want to second that no matter the situation, you lost a child. Let yourself feel all those feelings, and don't let anybody make you feel like your loss isn't as important as somebody else's. We're all going through this, and no matter what stage in the pregnancy or the child's life, we lost a child. And I think it's important to know that, and to not forget about that child, to remember that child every single day. Joey and I got tattoos of the baby's footprints, and we look at them all the time and just remember that baby. And we're going to tell Carter about that baby, even though we lost the baby at 15 weeks. It's still our child, and will always be. So definitely don't listen to people who don't understand and think that your loss isn't worthy of feeling grief. You feel grief, feel the feelings you need to feel. That would be my piece for sure.
And mine, have that person you can lean on. If you don't have a partner and you have experienced pregnancy loss, find that person. If you can't, there's Chris, Amy, Danielle, Joey. There's a bunch of people that that you can contact. Find that person, find that group, find that community. And if you are in a relationship, if you're married or dating, or you have that partner, lean on them. Make sure they can lean on you, and just be there for each other, because just being able to listen, not just hearing, but listening, goes so far. And acknowledging their feelings goes so far. And if you have that outlet, I like to golf, I like to play basketball, baseball, or if you like to play video games or something like that, have that outlet. Do something that you can separate yourself if you need to, but also acknowledge those feelings. And dads, you guys have feelings too. Chris and I feel the same way. We've had meltdowns. I just had one today leading up to this interview. So it's still, we still go through it. So don't feel afraid to lean on those feelings and deal with it how you deal with it. So yeah.
Okay, honestly, thank you, all four of you, for being so open and honest. Really appreciate it. And
We'll talk soon.
okay,
You guys.
Bye.
bye.
Thank you all for joining us for this workshop, and thank you to our incredible panelists, April, Chris, Amy, Joey, and Danielle, for being open and sharing their journeys with us. This video will remain on our YouTube channel to watch and share in the future. We invite you to join us for next month's workshop on Wednesday, August 18th at 7:30 p.m. about pregnancy after loss. If you have any questions or would like to reach out for support, we are here for you. You can contact our community support team at 705-725-1140 or email Colleen@hospicesimco.ca.